Hello and welcome to another installment of Nota Nada. I'm not Zim again, and today we'll be taking a look into, for me, a very exciting album, The OOZ by King Krule. Archie Ivan Marshall, also known as Edgar the Beatmaker, but better known as his stage name King Krule, has been surfacing up and making waves in this past few years. But prior to his rise to the mainstream media, our boy Archie here has already quite a loyal following, and within the underground scene at least with a blasé attitude in life that trickles into his music, a production style that is chaotic but with enough doses of serenity in times, and a low growly voice that packs angst, like depression, dissatisfaction towards a lot of things, with a songwriting and lyricism that revolves around an urban youth struggle. It's really to no surprise that King Krule has become some sort of an underground cult hero in the UK. And with the recent announcement by Archie himself that a new record coming soon, I think it's quite a good time to pull out his most recent full-length effort, The OOZ, and talk about it, as I'm very, very excited about what is to come and what he has in store for us. While I'm in love with the unpolished and rough way of production from the previous records that King Krule has put out, a style of production that he wears it really nicely and makes it work to his advantage, that a style that pushes a lot more angst and grunginess towards the forefront of his songs. The OOZ is a nice change of pace and a surprisingly nice breath of fresh air when it comes to a change in production itself. Now with a more polished style of production, a well done mixes where it accentuates a lot of the rhythm parts, or accentuates and clearly defines a lot of these musical elements, it really helps to, at least as a listener, to appreciate a lot of the genius that's behind a lot of these tracks and the effort that Krule has put into a lot of these tracks. But staying true to the King Krule brand, despite the polishness that it has in this record, none of the anger, none of the swampiness, the darkness is getting masked by how pristine some of these tracks sound. All these elements that is famous from King Krule is still very well prevalent and in the forefront of a lot of these songs. But instead of just good old anger and good old like angst and dissatisfaction, or like just darkness, it now has this tone of elegance and this tone of like a authority and kingly attitude that wasn't really present in the records that preceded the OOZ. Yes, there are some tunes within this record that is a bit tough to swallow due to like, or a bit forgetful due to the lack of like moving parts, or having too many textures washing out the mix itself, or rather flatline dynamic throughout the song that it's very hard for someone to be interested. The songs that do stand out in this record really stands out and shines from this new style of production, and let's talk about some of these tracks that. Let's start off this segment by none other than the opening track of The OOZ, Biscuit Town. And I feel like, personally, I put a lot of emphasis when I'm listening for an opening track, and I would say that Biscuit Town really nailed it for setting the tone for the album itself and the tracks to come, as it is just so like fitting. A very gentlemanly but almost like a mafia godfather kind of attitude in the vocals, a very, very cocky and arrogant guitar hook that complements the menace of the synth patches that just underflows throughout the whole tracks, held together by this crazy trip hop beat of sorts. It really blends well together, though on paper these elements don't seem to work. And the beat itself is very interesting. It's not always up there, it's not always present. And it's a very clever way of composition, I feel like, because of how King Krule delivers his vocals. When it's there, it makes you feel like it's an interesting rap verse, but when it's not there, it almost sounds like a spoken word session or some sort of poetry recital, which I felt like it's such an interesting way to provide tension release. And towards the end, where things get a bit crazier, the beat also still does float in and out of the mix, and it makes it sound so spontaneous, almost like a jamming session. It really sets the tone as to like how crazy and how chaotic this album is in general. And not to forget that the bass line itself, that is like just holding a lot of these tracks together, which will be a common theme, and I'll talk about it in a little bit. But the bass line, I specifically want to talk about it here because it also serves as a bridge towards the second track, Locomotive, which will also be more of a running occurrence where like a lot of these songs tie into each other or flow seamlessly to each other, which I personally appreciate in terms of production and album arrangement. Yeah, Biscuit Town is the perfect red carpet to roll out for the coming tracks in store for them. Next on the list, we have the single that was released prior to the album, Dumb Surfer, and it was probably one of my favorite tracks. Despite how some of it really gave me a glimpse of what the OOZ could be, and it didn't disappoint. But Dumb Surfer itself is probably one of my favorite tracks on this record. The eerie vocals, to the foul jazz chord progression on the guitars, to a drum beat that sounds like there's a slow impending doom waiting for you towards the end of the track. And not to forget the constantly hypnotizing chant of Dumb Surfer is it paints a very dystopian picture for the song itself, and I love it. I love it very much. I love it to death. It's just so good. So good. So good. Plus having an almost like not fitting and almost standoff-ish grand saxophone solo to push the climax of the song. It's just, I don't know what you're thinking, King Krule, but you goddamn genius, bro. But the cuts of like high energy tracks doesn't just stop there. We also have I also want to talk about Half Man Half Shark, a track that packs so much punch from start to finish. It's not like blast beats kind of fast, and it's not a very positive high energy like a punk song, or it's not Jiwang like a glam rock track that would provide that kind of energy. But it's this energy. It's very hard for me to explain. It's just death, but such a glorious death. The low raspy voice that King Krule is very famous for really did the track and really made the song what it is. And this strong beat that just doesn't stop and carries energy in its own right. These two elements really clashed with each other in the best way possible. You just hear the drums and the vocals just constantly like having a duel with each other in the track, but it's not like fighting for sonic space. It's more like this weird tension that they build between each other that it's neurotic, it's but somehow fun at the same time. And in midst of all that chaos, you just have this bass line, again a bass line that just sits on the sideline and just see these two elements fight. And to me, it just paints it provides such a weird comedic atmosphere, but at the same time a darkness that you cannot miss. And even as the track slows down, you can still somewhat hear a very like just very far back in the mix. You can still hear the bass line. You can hear the drums like as though they're trying to creep back up to the mix, and it provides this sweet tension where, as they do eventually resolve the song, a sigh of relief that comes with it is the payoff is really nice. And this song is really something else. But this album doesn't just have mischievous, high energy, naughty tracks that will keep you tapping your feet, but the slow cuts that is within this album is very fascinating and very captivating as well. When it comes to slow tracks, I would say that Lonely Blue is definitely one of the standout tracks, and for very, very good reasons. King Krule's performance here is, I would say, top notch throughout. Like in this album, he probably has the best vocal performance on Lonely Blue itself. The melodic lines that he chose, the vocal layerings are interesting, and the way he sings somehow like just it's so captivating and just so scary at the same time. It's a quality that not a lot of singers have, and I feel like he really like used it to max in Lonely Blue itself. But not just the singing, the lyricism in here is also like just very heart wrenching and like accompanied with how like the vocals flow in and out of unison with the guitars. Sometimes it follows the guitar lines, and sometimes it just blatantly falls out of it into its own tangent. Really, really did it for me. Like as a as a vocalist, he provides a spontaneity that not a lot of people can have, but still making it work and making it make sense. And I feel like that really shined throughout Lonely Blue itself. On top of all the minute vocal layering and everything, the synth texture and these small little bits and pieces of whether it's percussion, whether it's just more vocal sample bits that cumulatively adds together to provide this atmosphere that is famous to King Krule. It's just this cold, wet, kind of like disgusting thing, but it really complemented the main elements of this track, which is the vocals and the guitar, and it really cemented like the helplessness and the isolation that King Krule was trying to convey and intended for the track itself. Besides that, there's also track one. Oh, the keys. Ooh, the keys and the pitched up vocals. That intro. Oh, erect like a flagpole, bro. It's just so sweet, and having the other side of Archie vocals appear in this track, the side where it's nonchalant, I don't give a shit, and very laid back kind of thing. It was very, very fitting, and I would say that it provided a side of King Krule's music that was not present in whether it's Lonely Blue or Dumb Surfer, the tracks that we talked about before. The whole like he has this whole stream of consciousness type of lyricism that he has in this song, where a lot of the lyrics doesn't necessarily string together to the next line properly, but in the same time there's a very solid narrative underneath it, which I find it's a very clever way of writing, and it's definitely interesting because not a lot of people do this kind of thing. But to top it all off, like this, if it were to just stop here, it would be a nice track. But they had to go the extra mile and have this amazing jazz piano passage for the instrumental breakdown, and so good, dude, so good. And you think that as the piano, the jazz piano comes in, it will be the climax. The saxophone makes a return, and wow, it's just so grand, it's so nice. And also, for those of you who are into film, check out this track's music video, as it's really well shot. It was filmed by one of my favorite film directors, Frank LeBon, from the LeBon family. You should definitely check it out. And even though it's a music review, I cannot not mention this because the production value on that music video is just top notch. And last, one of the tracks, slow cuts that I felt that was a standout that I want to talk about is Slush Puppy, and Zim on the other side of the camera has very a similar consensus as well as to like why Slush Puppy is good. Like a lot of other tracks on this record, like I said previously, the bass guitar is doing a lot of the heavy lifting in the track itself, carrying the songs forward, or either in groove, in playing, or just sonically tying everything together. And I would say Slush Puppy within the whole album is the prime and perfect example of it. The slow riff that's in the beginning that transitions into this very calculated, very well composed, slow descending line towards the choruses. For me, the first few listens, I couldn't even like get myself to pull my attention away from the bass line and focus on the other elements, because the bass line is just like so well crafted and just complemented King Krule's vocals so well. And while some people might see it as a bad thing, I personally do see it as you have to have a really solid groove or a really solid musical motif to be able to have a song this skeletal and this minimal, yet still be so effective at the same time. This is why I think that Slush Puppy in itself is so special. While most of the chaotic and left field ideas that were funneled into this album turned out great, or just very effective, or they did a good job in expanding the ideas, there are some of the tracks that on this album that I personally feel was could have had a little more love or a little more attention paid towards it, because some of these premises are quite interesting, but so it's quite sad for me that some of these tracks are at the end of the production of the album, when it's released, are left to be decided for me personally. Songs like Logos, Kadai Limbo, A Slide In, parentheses, a new Drugs. A lot of these songs have very interesting motif or a very interesting premise or sonic texture to begin with, but that's the beginning and the end of a lot of these tracks. A lot of them are either very monotonous, like very flatline dynamics, which doesn't go anywhere throughout the song, or having too many textures that drowns out the main element that should be shining throughout the album, the track itself, or just having too little moving parts to keep me interested, and all these like factoring some of the more lackluster tracks in this album itself. In the grand scheme of things, a lot of these tracks serve as a decent extension to the songs that precede them or the songs that come after. A lot of songs like Logos or Slide In serve as a good extension of the songs that precede them or the songs that come after them. But even then, I wouldn't say it's a good excuse to not give them a little bit more of a push or try to expand them even more, which for me it's quite sad, but in the grand scheme of things it's okay, I guess. Overall, I love where King Krule is going with this album, the direction that they took. It's a subtle but a very definitive change at the same time. It's very exciting for me personally as a fan, or as someone who has been following their music. The rich and enhanced drum is now even more cleaner, even more prevalent, which helps drive a lot of these tracks. The added richness to a lot of these melodic elements, such as the guitars, the synths, the bass, provides a new color, a new side of King Krule that wasn't really present before. And on top of that, Archie himself really outdid himself in this one when it comes to vocal performances. He has matured. He has much more control in his vocals, and I find that very satisfying, because seeing him grow throughout the years has been nothing short of a great journey, and to see the band as a whole mature up, it's a very nice feeling for someone who's following them. But I have to say, yes, King Krule is quite a tough pill to swallow. It's hard to get started with, but it's a very, very addictive pill. Like once it clicks, it stays with you. A lot of the music are just like that. You just don't get it at first, but when the time comes and you make sense of it, it's a very special piece of art that you would not get tired of. It's unique, it's dark, it's swampy, and it's cold. It's everything I love about the more avant-garde side of music, or the weirded side of production, and I just couldn't get enough like King Krule, and the OOZ really satisfied that itch for me, and for that I'm giving this album a 4 out of 5. Please go give King Krule a listen, and not just King Krule. The rest of Archie Marshall's materials are quite interesting as well. The Beatmaker, the collaboration with Mon Kimby, or just Archie Marshall's solo stuff. Just go do check them out. Definitely give the OOZ a listen. I feel like it's a good entrance to Archie's discography as a whole. And if you have any other album that you find interesting, or you think it would be a good talking point, a good discussion for us, please leave a comment, send us a message on our social media platforms. And disclaimer again, before all these albums review videos, if you haven't listened to the albums prior to this, please do yourself a favor, go listen to it first, because we don't want to spoil the experience for you, because some of these tracks have a very strong narrative and we might contain some spoilers within our reviews. But anyway, we hope to see you again soon. Signing off, Nota Nada.